keeping an eye on politics, there was an interesting story that broke. Elon Musk, he has the attention of Trump. He's been a big donor to Trump. One of the things he did at Twitter was he tried to save money for Twitter by calling people back into the office. He was trying to reduce the head count of people on Twitter when he first bought that. And I think Trump's taking notice too. They're having a big push.
Right. That was one of his executive orders, I think, that he ordered all these federal workers back to work in the office.
I know that, and believe me, I know this.
And some of the, private industries now following suit. My son just got the notification today that, he works at a bank, a local bank, and does check processing. So he's not with the public. So he can work from home and did during COVID, and had been continuing to work 1 week each month at home, but now that's going by the boards. He will have to work full time from the office.
Well, and I'll say this: if you're a private company, you've got the right to do what you want. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you want all of your people in the office, you make the rule and you say it. I will say,
you know better than I worked at the Tribune. I was one of the few reporters who stayed in the office, so I don't really have much experience. But you do. You've worked at both the office and at home. You would be one that would think, what is more productive?
It's funny. I'm a big believer in the working from home, and I wouldn't mind being able to do that from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, though, and this has nothing to do with Elon or Trump or some of the other companies. My wife and I have talked about it, and sometimes it's easier when you work from home. You feel like you always have your laptop on, and like I was working as a news editor, and you always had this thought of, hey, a plane crash happened.
Right.
Let me keep updating the website with stories, and we got paid based on clicks. So,
right.
There was always that fear of, hey, this is something people might care about. Let's have this up and everything. And you feel like you never really get away from work. I think
I would be the exact opposite. I would be distracted a lot. I don't know. They're just by whatever. If there's a knock at the door or, whatever. TV's on, or if my wife's there and asking me questions, I would just, maybe I have an ADD, ADHD, touch, but that I have to focus on work, and I seem to do it better in an office environment than I do at home. At the few times I did work stories at home.
Yeah, I've it's funny. Again, everyone has different opinions about it. For me, my happy place is if I can listen to something. Like if I'm having a conversation with you all day, yeah, it's more of a personal conversation. It's hard to do work at the same time. But like right now, I'm here at my home. I'm home alone. Nobody else is here. I like to have some noise on in the background, like a podcast or music or a TV show, because it's nice to have background noise because sometimes the silence gets a little overwhelming.
Right. And if you're in the office, you're going to have to use earphones if you want that background noise.
Right. And I'll tell you, some people don't like that. Like when you work in the office.
I've worked for supervisors at the Tribune that, go around like a principal at school and, pluck the earphones or the earplug right out of the ear. I've seen that happen.
So I'll say, I've looked at, I've worked this from a regular employee to manager, and I've talked to business owners. And again, if somebody wants you to work from the office, go for it. I would say, and my message, I guess, if I could, to business owners and everything, is how best do you save money and keep the productivity up? And
it's a balance there. And I've seen that, some businesses have saved a lot of money by keeping their employees at home.
Right. And what kind of bugged me, and again, Trump's an older guy, maybe he's
traditional.
Yeah,
He's run traditional businesses. Hey, he was in real estate, so he wanted those big office buildings, to
right.
be occupied.
And again, you've got the right to say that, but I've talked to some business owners that have been concerned about their, the money, and are they, in the red or black or whatever else the case might be. And I think the
Right, the
hard,
overhead of
yeah,
running the office with just utilities alone.
well, person I recently worked with, it was important to them to have an office, but when you had the office, your overhead goes up, and you might sit there and you can convince yourself that, hey, this works best and everything, but there's no overhead. It's hard to say, and it's one thing if we're talking to individual business owner. I mean, that's fine. How person X who runs business X wants to use their money, that's fine. Now, if you work for them, you might be a little bit concerned, going, "Hey, hopefully they have enough money to pay me." But again, that's more of a personal choice. Leave it up to that individual business owner on how they want to do it. When you look at the federal government, the thought process is, hey, this is your money, the taxpayer money. We're trying to save you money and everything else. And I
Right.
know,
I mean, it goes both ways, but then, when you have a public service uh, phase of the government, like, say, um, I keep thinking post office, no, Social Security, or, IRS, say, and you have to show up in the office. You want to see people working. And if you should have an appointment with, maybe, something to do with your taxes, or your Social Security, you want to see somebody in the flesh working and waiting on you as
yeah,
a taxpayer.
yeah, definitely. And I kind of wonder, I know there's a lot of federal office buildings that I guess the narrative is they're not being filled right now. Well, you might sit there and say, okay, wouldn't that be better if all the people were back in their federal buildings? Would it save money if people are able to work from home, though? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
obviously, like banks and other stuff. There's some businesses where you
And
can't.
it's the philosophy of the person in charge. Trump is kind of like a hands-on kind of guy. He wants to press the flesh, whereas Biden, hey, he ran a campaign from his basement, on social media and Zoom meetings.
Yeah, yeah. So it's hard to say. I think in general, again, this is getting back to my personal views about politics. I think the hard thing about making wholesale changes is it's like one thing if say you become the boss of company X. Okay, yeah, you may not be there forever, but the thought is usually bosses are there for a while. Well, okay, maybe it makes sense then for you to change a lot of rules and everything. But for presidents, they're in power for 4, maybe 8 years. Is it the wisest thing to make a lot of changes where, the next president comes in, they make all the changes back? Doesn't that cost a little bit more money? Like, I don't know.
Right, right. You can see that too happening, and these are wild times, and to be, reporting on the government or actually working for a government. So, I know in Trumbull County we have some switch over here. A lot of Republicans have won and came into county office, and we have a new sheriff, we have a new clerk of courts, we have a new recorder, and new engineer, and there's new people involved, and the learning curve is here, and for those of us that have transitioned and from the old to the new, it's kind of bumpy, but we have to be patient, and I expect that in the federal government the same thing is going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. It's interesting to say. And, I'll repeat the same thing. I think I told you this last week about Trump. I think the thing that Trump and those of us as the American public reacts to Trump is, let's pick a couple things to deal with. I kind of feel like Trump is so revved up to go that he has like 15 different ideas every day. And yeah,
Right.
to a certain point, that is nice. It's nice to have a leader that has a lot of ideas. sometimes I feel like I get lost in all the ideas that are out
Right,
there. You know
right.
what I mean?
And for, a kind of an all around, I would just not even when I'm tuning in, I would go to social media for some of the ideas about Trump and what's going on, and watch a few newscasts on TV. Don't hit the mainstream media as your sole opinion on what Trump's doing, just because there's so many opinions out there about him. I mean, he's an enigma, really, and you love him or you hate him, and there's really not really a true non-partial picture of what's going on here.
Well, yeah, I think part of it, like when you're following this stuff, I mean, you and I are news junkies, so we tend to follow up a lot more. There's a lot of people out there that it's not
That
that they
don't
don't
really
care.
care, really.
Well,
They're looking at Trump, and if the gas is going down, if the price of eggs are going down, they're going to be happy if they get a raise, and it may not have nothing to do with Trump.
I think everyone cares to a certain point. I think some people just don't want to devote extra time a day to the news. You know what I mean?
Right, right,
Yeah.
and I see that.
And
Sometimes I'm sitting there with my wife, and let's go watch something else. This is
yeah,
depressing.
yeah, and I think the issue with Trump is when he's throwing out 15 different ideas. Not everyone is tuned in to every idea if you're for or against it. So sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed. You know what I mean? And I know in the government you're probably like, oh, we need to have all these ideas and everything. Well, when you have ideas and you try to throw stuff out there, sometimes the follow through gets a little bit lost. And even
Right.
if the government,
And it's interesting that, Republicans usually like less government. Well, with all these ideas, Trump is instituting more government, isn't he, with these more
yeah,
ideas?
yeah, it just I don't know. It's tough. I think time will tell. It'll be
Right.